Before we get into today's video, can I just take a minute to say thank you to all of you who've been watching these BTS series videos and leaving your comments. I've received so many positive and encouraging comments. It's very special, and I've been seeing some of them. I haven't had a chance to reply to all of them, and I'm just going to read out one here from the Lazy Wanderer Mice, MYS. I'm not sure what that means, but he says, "It's always a pleasure to watch your videos. And I honestly did not know about the flooded run of Kutch, and dare I say it looked even better? Well, to me at least. Look forward to the Ladakh story." I didn't know about the flooded run of Kutch as well until I went there and I found it, and I'm glad I was able to share that story with all of you, so everybody knows a little bit more now. But I did promise you guys a Ladakh story, and you seem to want it as well, so that's what we're here to do today. Today I tell you the story of how I nearly got lost in Ladakh. Hello and welcome to the channel. I'm Rohith. You know me here as Toll Free Traveler, and I think this is the 6th video in the BTS series, if I'm not mistaken. And we've been talking about some experiences from my ride, my 2016 ride from Chennai to Ladakh and back. It was a 3-month long ride, 15,000 plus kilometers, slow travel across diverse terrains, and many interesting experiences, a few of which I've been able to share with you. To quickly give you some context of location, we were at Pangong Tso. Just in case any of you don't know what Pangong Tso is, it is the most famous lake in Ladakh. Interestingly, on this particular day, we were doing a ride from lake to lake, from Pangong Tso to Tso Moriri. Tso Moriri is probably the second most famous lake in Ladakh. Again, stunningly beautiful. To go from Pangong to Tso Moriri, some of the locals that we met in Leh recommended that we take a route through Chushul. We needed to get a special permit in Leh to be able to ride this route because it takes you very close to the Indo-China border, and we managed to get that permit back in 2016, and we rode across Changla, got to Pangong, spent a night over there. Absolutely beautiful. But the next morning, early the next morning, we started our ride to go towards Tso Moriri. Now the thing is, by the time we did this part of the ride, we'd spent about 8 to 10 days in Ladakh already, and I think we'd ridden 600-700 kilometers. Before I went to Ladakh, navigation was something that I was a little bit concerned about. I didn't think it would be easy to find our way through the different parts of Ladakh, but as it would turn out, Ladakh was, even in 2016, a lot more touristy than I'd expected it to be. So in several places you had proper tarmac, and even if you didn't have proper roads, you did have signage to give you directions. You know, either you had proper signboards or you had little stones with directions painted on them. If you couldn't find either, you would keep running into people. Contrary to my expectation that we would barely see any people, there were actually a lot of vehicles on the road, a lot of tourist taxis, a lot of motorcyclists, and there were also shops and restaurants along the way. So if you didn't find signage to help you find your way, you would eventually find someone you could ask for direction. Now the people who recommended this route to me had not mentioned anything about the fact that this place is completely different from anything else that we had done so far in Ladakh. So we went into it unaware of what really lay ahead. So I think this was between the 8th and 10th of June 2016. We set off from Pangong Tso to ride towards Chushul and then onward to Tso Moriri. We got off to an early start, and it was a gloomy day. There were heavy clouds in the sky. In fact, it looked like there was a storm happening somewhere. I had no idea whether that storm was going to come towards us or not, but at that point in time, it didn't really matter. This kind of stormy weather, cloudy weather, you see it often in the Himalayas, especially depending on the time of year when you're riding there. And sometimes in the mountains, it looks crazy cloudy early in the morning, and then in a few hours, it completely clears up, or the opposite happens. So it wasn't a big cause for concern. The focus was on enjoying where we were, because this was the day when it finally felt like I was truly in the Himalayas. For the first 30-35 kilometers, you ride alongside Pangong Tso. Pangong is a massive lake. I can't even begin to tell you how large it is, and it's crazy because it's one of those lakes, depending on the height at which you are or the angle at which you're looking at it, it looks completely different. The mountains surrounding the lake are quite diverse and different heights, different colors, and also depending on the clouds and the sunlight, the lake itself keeps changing color. It's pretty mind-blowing. So the first 35 odd kilometers were relatively simple. The navigation was really easy. As long as the lake was on your left, you were going in the right direction. As simple as that. But eventually we got to a point where we had to leave the lake behind and head southeast to find Chushul. Now this is where things became totally different, because once you leave the lake behind, and I did not know this beforehand, but you enter pretty much what looks like a complete alpine desert. There are no roads, there are no trails as such. You need to depend on tire marks left behind by vehicles that have gone down this route before to navigate. We didn't know this, so initially we got to a point where suddenly we saw a whole spread of tire marks in different directions, branching off, diverging, and we were like, hey, which one do we take? We had to stop and sort of think about it. There wasn't a single person around to ask for directions. And what we didn't know then was the fact that most people who go down this route, like most of the traffic, is just headed to Chushul. It is just that everybody chooses a different route because the terrain is not very vehicle friendly. I mean, it's quite sandy or muddy, you need to sort of find your own path through all of this terrain. So different people probably have different ways in which they navigate this. So irrespective of which route you actually take, eventually I think 99% of the traffic comes back to Chushul. But we didn't know this at that point. We were completely clueless. So we had to assume that if we took the wrong trail, if we followed the wrong tracks, we could potentially land up in the wrong place. So I remember that at least on a few occasions, Karthik and I stopped and we were like, okay, listen, how do we go? And we were looking out in the distance to see whether there was anything that would give us an indication of where we had to go. But we didn't really have markers because the landscape entirely is very similar, and once you've left the lake behind, everything looks the same. So very quickly we realized that this was basically a game of going with the flow. We were quite lost and we were very terribly underprepared for this whole situation. But the only option available to us was to go with the flow. So you don't really know what you left behind and where you're going next. It was eventful, but I think the good thing is that both Karthik and I found this entertaining rather than getting worried about the situation we were in. I think we were quite excited about it because this truly was the kind of Ladakh that I wanted to see, like a barren landscape with no people around and these massive mountains. And for me, this was the time when I felt like I was in the Himalayas. You know, when the mountains make you feel like this little insignificant speck of dust. That hadn't really happened to me in the other parts of Ladakh. They were beautiful, but it hadn't given me that feeling of just being such a small part of the universe. So instead of feeling anxious about being lost, I actually felt like finally we were on an adventure. And that was pretty cool. So I'm glad I hadn't really found out more about this route and sort of prepared myself mentally, because I feel like then I may have not experienced the genuine emotions that I felt in that moment. So after several hours of being completely lost and just riding quite aimlessly, we found this tiny road that brought us to Chushul. So as it would turn out, we had been on the right route and we found the town that we were looking for. We didn't know what lay ahead, but as it would turn out, fortunately, the rest of the route, you do have a lot of broken roads, you do have a lot of crazy rocky trails, but at least the trails are defined. So you tend to know that you're going in the right direction. You don't feel as lost as you do in the part before Chushul. So it wasn't as overwhelming, compared to what we'd been through over, but it was still challenging. It was the most challenging and interesting day of riding for me in that entire trip in Ladakh. This route from Pangong to Tso Moriri, and there was no better way that day could end than by landing up at Tso Moriri. Because by the time we got to Tso Moriri in the evening, it was the complete opposite of Pangong that we left in the morning. It was clear skies, beautiful blue water, and it was just like the best way to end a day like that. It made you forget all of the drama that had happened during the course of the day, all of the fatigue that you were feeling from that intense amount of riding, and the range of experiences that you'd gone through during that day. The last 10 kilometers riding alongside Tso Moriri Lake, it felt like we just landed up at this beautiful lake without making much of an effort, and we were being welcomed into a paradise of a different kind. But I think that is the beauty of riding in Ladakh. Like, no matter what happens during your day, chances are there will be at least one thing that happens at some point during the day that makes all of the effort worth it, that makes all of the adventure worth it, that makes whatever anxiety you may have felt worth it, and that makes just all the risk worth it. To end this video, I'm going to leave you with a few more visuals of what I consider to be the most beautiful part of Ladakh from what little I've seen so far. This is a route that I hope to keep going back and riding year after year, and I hope it stays this way, that it doesn't get transformed and become as mainstream as the other parts of Ladakh have. But development happens everywhere, so if you are going to Ladakh anytime soon, I'd recommend you try this out before everything changes.